Hey guys, how you doing? Just wanted to pop in here today. I haven't done a video in a while because I've been busy with my Vegas Crime Files podcast, which I hope you guys are watching, or I should say listening to, the Vegas Crime Files podcast. I've been doing a lot of that. Coming out this week is going to be an episode about MS-13. As you may know, a couple of people were convicted in federal court of a bunch of charges. And they had been chased around by various people in Vegas, one of whom you will hear from on the podcast. So great stuff. And I don't think most people understand what kind of animals we're dealing with when it comes to MS-13. They are unique in their savagery as a gang. So you want to hear this. It's coming up this week. Get on the VegasCrimeFiles.com website. Get on the email list. You'll be the first to get the podcast when it comes out. And I'm very excited about what I'm doing. And I've got a lot of great stuff. And by the way, in case you don't know and haven't heard much about the podcast, this is all firsthand accounts of things that have happened. It's not me reading you a Google script, okay? You're going to hear from the detectives on the actual cases and how they experienced what happened. Because anybody can read the news reports. I mean, that's all out there. But a lot of times what the detectives experienced and saw firsthand, it just is not reported, and it should be. So that's what we're doing at Vegas Crime Files. So please check it out. All right. Couple of things I want to mention. First of all, I tried to watch the Fauci hearing this morning. I did. And I will say this. My cardiologist has recommended that I not watch it. I'm kidding. But seriously, I couldn't. I tried to watch it. And Senator Scott was asking some questions that, of course, Fauci was taking the fifth to. And then there was a next senator, a couple of senators, Democrat senators, who were just thanking him for his service and everything else. And you know what? We have choices in life as to how we spend our time. And I am not going to watch this psychopath sit there and deny everything or not even answer the questions. And what's so funny about it is we all know the issue on Fauci and what a complete creep he is. And he is a psychopath, I believe. Here's a guy who had all the answers. Remember 2020, 2021? He had all the answers. He knew what was best for us. And now he has no answers. He can't even, I believe he was the highest paid a federal employee at the time. Can't answer a question about anything that happened during his reign. So obviously I just can't. I can't watch him. But I will say this. God is watching. Proverbs 15:3. God's watching the evil and the good. He's not getting away with this, guys. He may not get punished on our timeline. He may not get punished where the way I think he should be, which is basically paraded publicly and then executed. I think he should be. He should be executed for what he's done because he knew what he was doing. And how many people died as a result of listening to his nonsense about the shots or suffered greatly because of his nonsense about lockdowns and separating people and kids out of school and all the things that were associated with separating everybody from each other. Terrible, terrible things happened under his reign. And I know you all know this, but it's funny. There was one senator. I'll just mention this one thing and then I'm just going to get off this topic because like I said, I get too mad. There was one senator today who said, well, we don't need to revisit. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We need to revisit and we need to remember everything that psychopath did to shut us down and separate people. I have a friend, and I've told this story on the air, but I'll tell it. I don't think I've told it on my podcast. Told it on the air in South Carolina a couple of times, even St. Louis. I have a friend. Let me give you an example of the kind of nonsense that went on under Fauci. A friend of mine's father was passing away in Downey, California, where the Carpenters were born. Downey, California. So they drive down to Downey, the two of them, to see the father who's dying. And they were very close to this father. My friend was married to his son. The son was very close. They get down there. The hospital finds out that they're not vaccinated. They will not let them go up and see the father. Okay. Finally, after they threw a fit, they were allowed to go in. I'm not making this up, guys. They were allowed to go in. The son was allowed to go in for 15 minutes to see his father. 15 minutes. Well, let's break this down as to what that means. His son is so contagious without the shot that they're going to let him into the hospital for 15 minutes to sit with his father. So if either he's contagious and he's dangerous to everybody, or he should be allowed to see his father. Either masks work, because they made him wear a mask and everything. Either masks work, and if masks work, it shouldn't matter if you're vaccinated, right? I mean, I understand. I don't need to give you the list of how illogical all these things work, okay? He goes in, sits with his father for 15 minutes. 15 minutes with his father who's dying. Now, I've lost both my parents. And I was there with my father when he passed away and my mother a few days before. And I'll talk about this at some point later on, but anyway, I don't want to get upset about it. I basically allowed her husband to have those last few days with her. I didn't mean to talk about this today. I think I made the unselfish decision to allow her husband to be with her those last few days, because the 3 weeks before she passed, my brother was there, I was there, my brother was there, I was there. We were there every minute that she was awake. And finally, it occurred to me that we weren't allowing her husband to have any time with her toward the end, in her last days. And I made the very difficult decision to come home. Didn't plan to talk about this. To come home and allow him to have those last few days with his wife, which was hard, really hard. Anyway, don't mean to get all weepy on this, okay? Because, grief is a private thing. Everybody should deal with it on their own. I understand. Anyway, the point I'm making is I've dealt with dying parents, and I cannot imagine some creep telling me that I can't go see my mother, father, husband, whoever, okay? So this security guard tells this guy he can come see his father for 15 minutes. Even though he wasn't vaccinated, even though apparently he was a danger to society, okay? After 15 minutes, I'm not making this up, this security guard came in the room of the hospital. I mean, like the security guard has nothing else to do in the ER in Downey, California, came up from the ER to pull my friend's hand off of his dying father and make him leave. Okay. So this is the kind of stuff that went on during COVID, the craziness, the complete insanity that people like Fauci were responsible for. And we've all got stories. You've got stories. If you were a parent, grandparent, you understand how completely crazy it was to keep kids out of school, to keep kids out of sports, couldn't go to the park, couldn't go to the beach. You're dealing with little children home, away from all their friends. Not that you can't entertain a child at home, but they can't play sports. They can't do this. They can't do that. They can't be around their friends. I mean, it was a disaster. Everybody knows that. He lied. His policies did not save any lives. And in fact, his policies of giving people the shot instead of things that actually would help them, like hydroxychloroquine and other things that could, in many cases, make a huge difference. I have a friend who actually smuggled some of that into the hospital to save her father's life because the hospital wouldn't give it to him. So she smuggled it in and gave it to him and saved his life. Because what they were giving him wasn't going to. She smuggled it in. So we can never, ever forget what Fauci did. We can never forget it. And Trump, and I'm mad at Trump, and I'm a Trump voter. You all know that. 3 times I voted for Trump. Trump needs to come down on this guy like a ton of bricks. But see, if he did, then he'd have to admit that he bought into it and this and that. He is just as guilty when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Now, Fauci put up the policy, I realize. But Trump needs to be front and center talking about how many people have been injured from the shot. I have a friend I was just talking to the other day, a dear friend of decades, who's completely disabled from the shot. I have other friends, neighbors, people who've died. I think most of us know some people who have been injured. If you don't know anybody who's been injured or died from the shot, then you haven't opened your eyes. That doesn't mean everybody you know who's died in the last 5 years has died from the shot. Nobody's saying that. I've never said that. But if you don't think it's happening, you don't think it's weird that everybody's getting cancer out of nowhere, they look completely healthy and they have stage 4 cancer. Since when? That's never happened. You get stage 1, maybe they catch it at stage 2. All of a sudden you look beautiful and healthy and you're stage 4 and you're dying. Okay. Anyway, I can't even waste my time if you don't agree with that or you don't see what's happening to some people. Luckily, not all. Thank God it's not all. I don't know what to tell you. But I will say this about Fauci. God will take care of him. I can't. I have to lay it at the foot of the cross. I can't deal with it. I'm not in charge of dealing with it. God is. And God will deal with him. He's not getting off scot-free. You may think that. There are all kinds of passages. Proverbs especially talks about all kinds of passages about how people, are the evil will plot various things, and they're not getting away with it. God is watching all of them. So take heart if you're somebody who's vaccine injured or somebody who just got really screwed over from Fauci policies. Please take heart and understand God's got this. Okay. So that's enough on Fauci. He's the psychopath, in my opinion, a complete psychopath. And by the way, if you're curious about psychopathy, where'd I put this? I read a book a while back called The Wisdom of Psychopaths. A really good book. I highly recommend. I'm always reading something crazy. And it was quite good. Okay. And I didn't plan to talk about this today either, but I will. It's called The Wisdom of Psychopaths. Highly recommend you read it. And one of the things that he talked about in the book is, everybody thinks of a psychopath as being some kind of serial killer. It's not true at all. There are people who are psychopaths in all kinds of places in life and politics. And the number one occupation for psychopaths, you want to know what it is? CEO. CEO. Number 3, media. Uh-oh. Anyway, let me just give you some signs of a psychopath. Once again, I'm not a medical professional, but if you don't think this is Fauci, number 1, superficial charm. A common psychopath characteristic is charm. A psychopath's charm is specifically suited to their target, and it's not authentic. I mean, Fauci, right? People thought he was charming. Number 2, they try to manufacture negative reactions. Another sign of a psychopath is a propensity to create chaos. They intentionally create chaos, sit back, play innocent, and blame you for reacting. Boy, I had a boss like that once. I'm not going to go into that. I had a radio boss like that once. Loved to try to get us to fight with each other so he could sit back. Oh, yeah. Whole other story. Psychopaths will provoke you, and then when you understandably react, they'll patronizingly inform you that they're not having this discussion with you again because they're gaslighting you. Number 3, you catch them in lies repeatedly and with no clear motive. It's Fauci. Tell me where Fauci isn't in this part of this group. They seem incapable of guilt or shame. Fauci, not my fault. I did what was right. They change allegiances without a second thought, no matter how intense the betrayal. Fauci. They turn people against each other. No, Fauci didn't do that, did he? Turn people against each other? Nah. They trigger your cognitive dissonance. This is really important, guys. Cognitive dissonance. I've talked with Dr. Kelly Victory over the years about this. Really important when people absolutely see what's going on and that yet they pretend like it's not happening. How many people are pretending like things aren't happening around them? People aren't vaccine injured. People aren't dying. Things aren't happening that are bad. Cognitive dissonance. Anyway, if you don't think Fauci fits into this category completely, I do. All right. I need to get a cough button for this mic. That'll be my next purchase. All right. So yesterday, I was asked to speak at the Southern Hills Republican Women Organization. A wonderful group of ladies. There were some men there too, of course. But a great group of people, really great. And I had a great time talking to them. And they asked me to talk about, because they were celebrating the 250th anniversary of America, even though it's July 4th, but still, they were still celebrating it, because we always should celebrate it. And they asked me to talk about about patriotism and whatnot. So I decided to talk about how the culture war is patriotic, because it is. Now, y'all know that I have certainly been on the front lines of the culture war when I've had people try to destroy me financially, professionally, and other ways, because they didn't like what I said about, families and how families are do best with moms and dads and kids, right? Okay. So I talked about this. I didn't make the topic about me so much, but I talked about culture and how it's important to be concerned about our culture. Because, of course, our founders were concerned about it. They didn't call it culture. Let me give you an example. John Adams, our Constitution is made for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Well, you've heard that express. I hope you've heard that quote. And it's true. John Adams would have been a great talk show host. He would have been like Mark Levin, I'm sure. Now, here's the thing. When you talk about how, and I'm going to break this down because it's important. When John Adams talked about our Constitution being made only for a moral and religious people, it's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. He's talking about the fact that if you are not internally controlled, I talked about this yesterday in my speech. If you are not internally controlled, you can't have freedom. There are people in the world who live under dictatorships of whatever kind, oppression. And when they live under these dictatorships, they are told what to do every minute of the day, where to live, how to live, where to work, or not to work, or not to drive, or this. I mean, they're controlled. Everything in their life is controlled by a dictatorship. And so they behave themselves because they have to, not because they necessarily want to. You take that away from people. You take the external control away from people. And suddenly you have chaos because people don't know how to say, like most Americans, we're all flawed, we're all sinners. But most Americans don't do things, some things in the course of their day, because it's not the right thing to do. It's not because someone's going to kill me if I do it. I mean, if I don't pick up my dog poop at the park, no one's going to arrest me, but I pick it up because it's the right thing to do. If I remove my shopping cart, put my shopping cart back in the rack at the grocery store, it's the right thing to do. Nobody's going to arrest me, but it's the right thing to do. And that's internal control. There are all kinds of things every single day that we do in our lives that are a result of our internal compass telling us that's the right thing to do or that's the wrong thing to do. Now, it's not okay to beat your kids, beat your dogs, beat your wife, beat your husband. Not okay. But that's not because the government, I mean, obviously it's against the law to do those things, but people may not know you're doing those things. But you have the decision to make with your own morality and say that's not right. And if people don't have that control and you take the external control away from them, suddenly you have chaos. People have to learn to live in freedom. They have to learn to be able to control themselves, to be able to walk down the street and not victimize somebody else. That's really important. Ben Franklin, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. To my point about how you need external control if you're not going to behave yourself. And this is, you got a society many times that's full of people who don't take ownership of their own lives. Another great book that I highly recommend you read if you ever get a chance called Life at the Bottom, The Worldview That Makes the Underclass. And there's a great example in this book where this professor who wrote the book, not professor, he was a psychologist who worked with the lower income folks in England. I believe most of them were white at the time he wrote the book. Maybe not all, but most of them were white. But he talks about the attitude people had about, government and things like that. And for example, there was one woman who complained that her kids had no place to play in the backyard because her backyard was full of trash. And the doctor said, well, why don't you clean it up? She goes, well, I've called them. In other words, it was up to whoever to pick up the trash and not her. See, that's somebody who doesn't take responsibility for their own life. And isn't it easier? It's a lot easier to say, well, I called them. They won't pick up my trash. They won't pick up the trash in the backyard. They won't put my trash cans out. They won't clean my house. They won't change my carpet. They won't do this. They won't do that. They won't do it. So therefore, it's so much easier to blame your life circumstances or anything you don't like in life on the fact that somebody else hasn't done it. People like that. Believe it or not, those of us who appreciate freedom have a difficult time understanding that because with freedom comes responsibility. Everybody knows that. So if you appreciate freedom and you want to keep your freedom, you've got to be responsible for yourself. Like look what happened in New Orleans during Katrina. There was another book, great book written about. It was called The Politics of Disaster, and they talked about Katrina and how a lot of people who went, the vast majority of people who went into the dome where there was such chaos. You know why they went into the dome? They went into the dome because they didn't have 2 days worth of food at home. Not because their house was destroyed or they didn't have any food in the house. And I remember, because I was single for many years before I was married. I understand. I hardly had anything in the house. I had condiments. Okay, get your mind out of the gutter. My mom would come to visit and go, I can't cook. There's nothing here. I said, well, I don't eat here. But I didn't have, canned food that would have lasted me a week. I didn't. Bottled water. I just didn't think to store that kind of stuff. And a lot of people in New Orleans didn't do that either. So they wound up, and there were people who didn't leave their houses and they wanted government to come and save them. Well, as I've said a million times, government's the first responder, not you. But if you've got a society full of people who just they expect government to do it. Government's always done it. Government has housed them, fed them, and done everything else for them. So now when a hurricane occurs, they don't know what to do. Like there was a hurricane, as you know, or tornado, I should say, terrible tornado in Wisconsin the other day, which apparently never happens in that part of the world. Beautiful place there. And it's terrible, but I guarantee you those people, they're resilient. People in that part of the country are resilient and resourceful. And they're going to pull it together, and they're going to be out there with chainsaws, chopping up the wood and getting it back together as quickly as anybody possibly can. I believe that. And that's what happens in Florida a lot of times. You see the people in Florida jumping up immediately as soon as the hurricane's over with chainsaws and getting the streets cleaned and cleared out so that the electrical trucks can get down the street. And, you simply have to get off your butt, be self-reliant, because at the end of the day, if you're not, nobody else is coming for you. They might get around to eventually if it's a public entity or utility, but they're not coming right away. So you're going to have a plan for your family right away. And a lot of people don't. So some other things I talked about with my speech about the culture war is the fact that people have to be courageous enough to take stands. We all know about Sophie Cunningham, God bless her, great basketball player, but also standing up for women in sports and standing up in a nice way. She's not saying anything nasty about trans people, nor have I ever. And nobody hates trans people that I know of. I think that a lot of or most of them are very confused in this and that, but I don't hate them. But she's, defending women. Where are the women standing up for the women in sports who are getting trounced? It's not happening a ton, but it is happening. No man, physically male, should be competing against women. Shouldn't happen because they're stronger. I mean, there's a reason we have women's sports and men's sports. Why do we have the LPGA? Because women don't hit the ball as far as men. I mean, come on. Do I have to explain? I don't have to explain that. So that's another problem, that you've got, people who are not willing to stand up and take a stand. And in Nevada, thank God for Stavros Anthony, who was out front of the issue with women in men's sports long before it was popular, long before he put his finger in the air and went, oh, is this the right thing to do? I think I'll jump on board. Not Stavros. He was out there and got punished for it by some people who didn't want to pass his legislation and some other things that happened as a result of him standing up for women in sports. So this is important. I mean, when you look at something, we're talking about culture. I mean, look at Major League Baseball. If you don't wear a hat that celebrates somebody's lifestyle, you're a bad person. You're a hater. Why are you a hater? You shouldn't be forced to wear a hat that goes against your spiritual beliefs. I mean, if you're somebody who's, let's say you're a vegan, okay, and you're forced to wear like a steak t-shirt or something promoting barbecue ribs, I'm sorry, why should you be forced to do that? Why should you be forced to wear a t-shirt that talks about Jesus when you're not a Christian? I mean, it's very simple here. I know these are deep points, but these are some of the issues that we're dealing with culturally that our founding fathers could never, ever have imagined that we'd have to deal with. These are some of the points I made yesterday. And the bottom line is this. There's a lot more, but I don't want to take up enough time today. Here's the bottom. And one other thing I do want to mention before I get to my closing comments here. What I don't like, and I have no patience for, is the shoulder shrug that people have when it comes to culture. When Mike Vrabel, the coach of the Patriots, was having an affair with that girl, that's none of my business. Okay. What made me, and it's none of my business that his wife kept him for whatever reason. Plenty of people have gotten through that. Okay. None of my business. I'm all for marriage and I hope they work it out. Okay. But when it was publicized, and first he lied about it. Obviously, he told a million lies for 6 years, but then he lied about it publicly. Then finally had to basically, it came out, he had to admit it. And then when he goes to have a meeting, and whether he should be fired or not is also none of my business. That's the organization's decision to make. I think so because he was a distraction, because everyone was talking about his sex life and not the team, but that's me. And I don't think you show any leadership when you're being that much of a scumbag. What kind of leadership, what kind of man, what kind of leader of men are you? Okay. That's wrong in my opinion, but okay, it's not my team. So he goes and he has a meeting with the big donors for the Patriots, and they applauded him when he walked in the room. Just win, baby. Just win, baby. We don't care. We don't care what you do. Well, okay. So I posted something on X about it, and a guy said to me, what's the big deal? People cheat on their wives all the time. People commit adultery all the time. What's the big deal? Okay. So let's go with that logic. If people cheat on their spouses all the time, and we're supposed to ignore it as a society or think it's okay or shrug our shoulders and go, it happens. Let's apply that logic to everything else. Let's apply that logic to people molest kids all the time. No big deal. People run red lights all the time. People beat their spouses all the time. People do whatever. People steal from others all the time. People steal cars. Why bother? Why have, any kind of a detail dedicated to people stealing stuff? Robbery detail or anything like that. Why? Who cares? They rob a casino. So what? They rob a jewelry store. So what? They knock off an old lady walking in the morning, which happened in Vegas a while back. Kill a woman walking in the morning with her friend. Who has anything of value on you at 6 o'clock in the morning when you're walking? I know this because I walk my dogs all the time. I don't have anything of value on me. And this punk killed her in the middle of the street. She couldn't hear him and he's demanding things. She didn't have anything on her. Well, that's okay. That happens all the time. Come on, let's just ignore it. See, you have to follow that line of thinking all the way through. If people do it all the time, what's the big deal? Well, that's not, as a Christian, and that's what I filter everything through, that's not what the Bible says. But God says this is who you were, and this is who you're supposed to be, once you become a Christian. This is who you were. You were dead in your sin because you didn't know any better. Even if you know better, logically. You are now a new person. You've been renewed. Spiritually renewed. And that doesn't mean you're not going to sin. I'm not saying that. But you've been renewed. So now you're supposed to see the world in a different way. But this idea that God doesn't say, well, just keep doing what you were doing. It's not a big deal. There's nowhere in the Bible that God just goes, well, people are going to gossip. What's the big deal? People are going to steal from others. They're going to plot evil, all these things that are in the Bible that are, God knows what we're going to do. But God doesn't shrug his shoulders and go, it's going to happen. What's the big deal? No, he does not. And we shouldn't do it either. And so it's not a question of judging everybody. It's a question of not tolerating certain things that weaken our nation. And the way people treat others, whether it's abuse, neglect, these kinds of things, adultery. Adultery hurts a nation because when you cheat, you're telling how many lies to your spouse. How do your kids feel about you when they found out you lied to your mom for 6 years while you were bopping this other woman? That's a whole mess for another day and not my business, but it's my business when it comes to society. When society goes, oh, this is cool, whatever. He's a winning coach. Who cares? Don't come crying to me when someone cheats on you and society goes, or your friends go, how would you like it? Here's a perfect example. How would you like it if your spouse cheated on you and you went to your friends and not that you should run off to your friends and tell them everything. But if you went to your friends or your close friend or a pastor and said, this is happening, and they went, what's the big deal? People do it all the time. You know what you're going to do. That's not the way you're supposed to live. So we're supposed to strive for better. And as a culture, we're supposed to strive for better because a culture is defined by what people will accept. Not that evil doesn't occur in every nation on earth because people are basically rotten. But we're defined by what we accept. And that's how we maintain being a great country. And let me just say one other thing about politics and politicians and whatnot. Somebody came up to me the other day at this event and they said, oh, well, I've read your Facebook pages. And she's a politician. And I understand you don't have a high opinion of politicians. Well, that's not really true. I don't have a high opinion of many of them, but I do applaud anybody who runs for office. God bless you. But I also know that there are people who run for office for the wrong reasons. I think we all know that. But at the end of the day, we can't put our trust in them. We cannot say, if we only get these people in office, if we only have a majority, a Republican majority in the legislature, then we'll be able to what? Raise taxes? It's happened before, kids, with Republicans in the majority. I was there for that. Not in the legislature, but I was there watching. So it can happen again. But the point is, you can't put your trust in these people, ever. You have to get the best people in office, and sometimes all you can do is try to be a speed bump against bad policies, and that's great, and that's admirable. But at the end of the day, all we can do is try to fight for what's right. And it was Mother Teresa, I believe, who first said this. It was also quoted, Chuck Colson quoted it in his book. It's a great quote, that at the end of the day, and I'm paraphrasing here, all we're called to do is be faithful. I'm not called to solve every problem with corrupt politicians, every problem with taxation that hurts people. I'm not called to do that, nor is anybody in the legislature. I'm called to be faithful. I can only do what I can do in my little small sphere of friends and universe and whatever it is and influence, whatever influence that may be. I'm called to be faithful in that. And at the end of the day, I can look myself in the mirror and say, look, I stood up. Maybe I didn't win. Maybe I got run over by a bulldozer, but I stood up. And that's what it comes down to. That's really what it comes down to. And remember, never forget, Jesus never said, I'd love to get this thing going. I'd love to get this movement started if we could just get rid of Herod. If we could just get rid of Pilate, because those guys are so corrupt and so what's the word I'm looking for? Gutless. Let's just get rid of those guys. But we got to until we can get rid of Pilate and Herod, we can't get anything done. So just just hang on, guys. Jesus never said that. And we can't say that. We have to stand up to what God wants us to do and how God wants us to live our life. That's what's important. And until we do that, we're not going to make an improvement. And I know human nature is what it is. There's always going to be evil, and I get that. But let's make sure that we stand up individually and don't expect somebody else to stand up for something when you won't do it yourself. When you're at the family barbecue and you're not standing up against somebody who's mouthing off about something that you think is completely wrong, you won't do it, but then you want somebody in the legislature to do it? Well, it's his job to go in there and go blah, blah, blah. No, it's not. It's your job. It's everybody's job to stand up. So if you don't stand up individually, I don't know why I'm looking down instead of at the camera like I'm supposed to be. Oh, there I am. If you don't stand up individually for things that matter, don't be complaining. Then somebody else does it. Why would you expect them to just because they ran for office? That's stupid. All right, guys. Anyway, that's my rant for today. Appreciate you being here, and I'll try to do more of these when I have time. But I will see you guys soon. And don't forget, Vegas Crime Files. Vegas Crime Files. It's everywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, everywhere. Okay. What is it? What's the app? Odyssey app and all these, everywhere has got it. Vegas Crime Files. And if you don't think of that, remember, vegascrimefiles.com. Get on my email list and you'll be the first to get the podcast that's coming out this week. Probably today, it's about MS-13 and the hunt for the MS-13 guys who ultimately did get convicted by a federal court and some of the heinous things these guys have done, just to give you an idea of who was. Okay, guys, I'll see ya.